You've probably heard of the German resistance to Hitler, most famously Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg's daring bomb attempt at the Wolf's Lair in July 1944. But far fewer know the name of Captain Ruprecht Gerngross, an army officer who, in the final desperate days of World War II, organised a full-blown uprising in Bavaria. An uprising that led to open rebellion against the Nazis, not only in Munich, but in several nearby towns, including one whose name the world already associated with horror, Dachau. The air crackled with static before a voice broke through. It spoke clearly in German, words that had not been heard on the radio in 12 long years. It was April 27th, 1945, in the small but beautiful market town of Dachau, just a few miles from Munich. A handful of local leaders stood frozen around the wireless set as they listened. "This is Bavarian Freedom Action," declared the voice. "We have taken control of the city of Munich in the name of Bavaria. We call upon all patriotic German soldiers to resist the criminal National Socialists who have led Germany to absolute destruction." The man speaking was Captain Ruprecht Gerngross, a Wehrmacht veteran who had fought in both Poland and on the Eastern Front. A Bavarian nationalist, yes, but one who had grown to despise the Nazis and everything they had done to his country. As he stood before the microphone that day, Gerngross had carefully stripped his uniform of every Nazi symbol. The eagle and swastika were gone from his cap. The insignia above his breast pocket had been unpicked. Even his combat medals, earned through blood and hardship, had been removed, their designs tainted by the Nazi regime. Thus cleansed, he spoke to Bavaria, not as a Nazi officer, but as a free man. Gerngross ended his broadcast with an extraordinary rallying cry. He urged his listeners to begin what he called a great golden pheasant hunt. Golden pheasant was the nickname Germans had given Nazi party officials, mocking their brown and gold uniforms. For listeners who had spent over a decade hearing nothing but Joseph Goebbels' propaganda, such words were electrifying. Across Munich and neighbouring towns, people began to act. The Gestapo and SS scrambled to contain the rebellion, but resistance was already spreading like wildfire. In Dachau, however, the stakes were even higher. Just outside the town stood the infamous Dachau concentration camp, where over 30,000 prisoners still clung to life under the cruelty of SS guards. Some townspeople wanted to help the prisoners. Others feared what would happen when the Americans arrived. Captain Gerngross himself had turned against the Nazis years earlier after witnessing the massacres of Jewish civilians in Poland. By April 1945, the Americans were closing in on Munich. On April 23rd, one of Gerngross's comrades, Major Alois Braun, had already made contact with the advancing American forces, hoping to arrange a peaceful surrender of the city. But Munich's Nazi Gauleiter, Paul Giesler, refused to give up. He vowed to defend the city to the last man, and he had backup. Battle-hardened troops from the 10th SS Panzerdivision Frundsberg. Gerngross's Bavarian Freedom Action movement had little to fight with, just Gerngross himself, his 440-man interpreter company, sympathetic Home Guard units, and a handful of reservists. On April 27th, they rose. They seized Munich's City Hall, 2 radio stations, and the offices of the Nazi Party's 2 daily newspapers. From there, Gerngross broadcast his call to arms. Meanwhile, in Dachau, plans had already been quietly forming. Town leaders agreed that obeying the Nazi command to resist the Americans would be suicidal. The US Army would simply destroy the town. So their only hope was to overthrow the Nazi administration themselves before it was too late. Yet Dachau faced an added moral dilemma. Right outside town was the massive concentration camp. If the Nazis chose to massacre the prisoners before retreating, thousands would die. Among those organising the revolt was Georg Scherer, a local athlete and communist who had spent time as a prisoner in Dachau years earlier for distributing anti-Nazi leaflets. While imprisoned, Scherer had met Walter Neff, a head nurse in the camp hospital block. Neff had secretly protected vulnerable prisoners, hiding them from the SS. Neff himself had once been part of a failed bombing plot in Austria, and after his arrest, he was forced by the SS to participate in the T4 euthanasia program, selecting tuberculosis patients to be gassed. It was a guilt he would carry for life. Scherer was released from Dachau in 1941 and returned to live in the town, keeping in touch with Neff. By 1945, as Germany collapsed, Neff had deserted his penal tank hunting company and returned to Dachau with two friends, Jakob Schmidt, a social democrat, and local glass painter Cyrus Suller. Together they began to plan how to defend the town and, if possible, save the camp's prisoners. Some local officials quietly supported the plan. Deputy Mayor Hans Zimmer, Police Chief Georg Engel, and even SA leader Michael Bauer. Their shared goal was simple: to prevent Dachau from being destroyed when the Americans arrived. To make the plan work, they needed soldiers. The only ones available were members of the local Volkssturm, or Home Guard, 130 poorly armed men, led by Captain Josef Langenberger and his sergeant major, an SA man named Berger, who was sympathetic to the cause. On the rainy afternoon of April 28, 1945, the uprising began. Loyal officers replaced Nazi commanders, and troops were stationed around the town hall and administrative buildings. The local police did not intervene. When Nazi district leader Hermann Nafziger and the SS-appointed mayor Hans Bayer learned of the rebellion, they were furious but powerless. Only one man resisted: Heinrich Niederhofer, a die-hard SA loyalist who stormed toward the town hall with a machine pistol. A scuffle broke out with the guards, and Niederhofer was shot dead. But fate was not on the rebels' side. Nearby, a senior Nazi general and his staff were stationed in the area, believed to be none other than SS Obergruppenführer Oswald Pohl, Inspector General of all concentration camps. Upon hearing of the uprising, he immediately called in reinforcements: 3 companies of SS Panzergrenadiers from the 10th SS Division. The counterattack was swift and merciless. The SS launched an assault on the town hall. The rebels, the armed farmers, deserters and escapees, fought bravely but were hopelessly outgunned. When the smoke cleared, 3 prisoners and 4 local townsmen lay dead. Their bodies were displayed in the street as a grim warning to anyone else who might resist. The surviving rebels fled into hiding. Dozens of Home Guard soldiers were captured, but later released. Though Dachau's rebellion had been crushed, similar uprisings had flared in Landshut and Penzberg, forcing the Nazis to divert troops and Gestapo units to suppress them. In Munich, fierce street battles broke out between Gerngross's forces and Giesler's loyalists. The SS eventually retook the radio stations and newspapers, but Munich's city hall held out for a time. Gerngross and many of his men managed to escape before it fell. Giesler's retribution was swift and brutal. 57 members of the Bavarian Freedom Action were executed, but nothing could stop the Allied advance. The next day, Giesler and the SS abandoned Munich without a fight, fleeing to Berchtesgaden, Hitler's mountain retreat. On May 7, 1945, the day before Germany's surrender, Paul Giesler and his wife took their own lives. As for Oswald Pohl, the man believed to have ordered the crushing of Dachau's revolt, he was hanged in 1951 for crimes against humanity. The courage of those who rose up in Dachau was not forgotten. A plaque now adorns the town hall in their honour. Georg Scherer served as deputy mayor until 1952, while others involved in the uprising lived out peaceful lives in the town they had once risked everything to save. In November 1946, 6 nearby streets were renamed after the fallen, and the square in front of the town hall was given a new name, Resistance Square. And as for Captain Ruprecht Gerngross, the man whose voice first broke 12 years of silence, he survived the war, living quietly in Munich until his death in 1996 at the age of 80. His words, broadcast into a terrified nation in its final days, still echo across history, a reminder that even in the heart of darkness there were Germans who chose to fight back.